He's continued to do a lot of good pastoral work within his old diocese too, by the way. He's still called upon to do quite a bit there. He's given talks around the country. I don't know if many of you saw that Compass program that Geraldine did with him after his dismissal. And complete absence of bitterness there. He just very, he didn't anyway resign from anything he'd said. And he said, and that's what the book has been all about too. Well, I've got a copy here. Launch. I'm just getting to this. And then one of the things, of course, he was accused of not having, the support of his people. Well, there was a wonderful mass that took place in 28th of August 2011, and it was just a beautiful celebration of his ministry in the diocese of Toowoomba. I'll just finish now with a letter that I wrote to the Toowoomba Diocesan Leadership Group, who were trying to take up Bill's cause. This is after his dismissal, of course. So I've written this letter on the 10th of August in reply to a letter that they'd written to all the Australian bishops a week earlier. At the outset, I wish to express my deep disappointment at the treatment Bishop Morris has received. Like you, I see him and the whole diocese as being victims of a great miscarriage of justice. When I gave the priest retreat in Toowoomba in 2003, when I spent time in the diocese during the National Council of Priests Convention in 2006, and in many other instances when I have observed with admiration so many positive features of the diocese, I have consistently been given the impression not only that the diocese of Toowoomba was in good shape, but that it was responding positively to the Second Vatican Council's vision for the Church today. I saw Bishop Morris's inspiring leadership as being an integral part of such a healthy local church. I noted too the strong bonds of communion existing between bishop, clergy and faithful. My observation showed a far-flung diocese doing everything possible to see that individual and community needs were being met in Christ-like fashion, with healthy ecumenical and community relations, and with a real care for issues of justice, peace and development. In an age when so many people, both within and outside the Catholic fold, are asking legitimate questions about the life of the Church today, Bishop Morris courageously gave voice to such issues. Among Bishop Bill's strengths are that he is a good listener, that he has never lost touch with the joys and the hopes, the griefs and the anxieties of his people, and that he courageously attempts to have the Church respond as Jesus himself would have done. As a close friend of Bishop Bill and sharing his vision for the Church today, I have been aware for a number of years of his problems with the Holy See. I have admired the way in which he has loyally done everything possible to remain in communion with the Pope as the successor of Peter. I admired how step by step he tried to have an honest conversation with Vatican officials and finally with the Pope himself. I do not believe that he always felt that there was a genuine reciprocity in the dialogue. Surely in a healthy church we should be able to speak the truth in love. I do not believe that any of us are doing justice to the mission of the Church when we neglect to name the issues which are hemorrhaging the Church at the moment. Our current woes around sexual abuse should provide important lessons here. It is not insignificant that Bishop Morris provided excellent leadership in this domain locally, nationally and internationally. For my part, I wish to express my solidarity with all the people of Toowoomba Diocese in these difficult times. I add my voice to Bishop Morris's plea for you not to walk away from the Church as you might be tempted to do. It is your spiritual home as much as it is Pope Benedict's. Like Bishop Bill, we all need to act with faith, hope and love, and with his passion for justice and truth. More than ever, our world today needs the message of Jesus. You people of Toowoomba are in a unique position to witness to that in the best of the Catholic tradition. So it's a great privilege for me tonight to launch Bishop Bill's Apologia, Benedict, me and the Cardinals 3.
Thanks, Bishop Pat, for that very moving launch. And in fact, when we were talking about having launches around the country, and the only capital cities that aren't having them are Hobart and Perth and Darwin, Bill was very keen to have Pat do the launch here in Canberra because of his great bond and friendship and support over the years. Book launches are a time of celebration and closure. That the event has arrived, the book is here. I'd like to thank the ACCC for working with us and having this launch here tonight. I'd like to thank Stephen for being the MC, and I'd like to thank Pat for doing the launch. Some of the other launches we've had around the country, last night in Adelaide and on Monday in Sydney, Frank Brennan, who had been following, as he said, the saga of Bill's journey, and that is up on Eureka Street. In Brisbane, we had the Honourable Bill Carter, who had been the retired judge who had done an evaluation of the process, and he was very forthright in saying that natural justice hadn't been fulfilled, and his speech is also up there on the Eureka site. We've been working with Bill over the last 3 years on this book. In May 2011, after he took his early retirement, we contacted him about 3 weeks later to say that he considered publishing his story. In July of that year, I got a response from a number of people who were sussing us out on his behalf to see whether we were a worthy publisher. He said then, when he did contact me, he wanted time to think and time to rest and time to reflect. So in 2013, we had a series of monthly meetings in Brisbane, usually at the airport in the Qantas Club for a few hours, where we were nutting out how it would proceed. And then towards the end of last year, we were having full-day meetings together. We were trying to work out how to bring this book together. And as Pat said, there was no business with Bill. For Bill, he wanted to tell his story, and he wanted to tell his story principally to the people of what he referred to as his diocesan family in Toowoomba. Because for many of them, they did not know the full details of many of the things that had occurred in that process. They didn't know, many of them, that Archbishop Chaput had been in the diocese on visitation. They didn't know of many of the meetings that he was involved in with Rome. And so for Bill, he principally wanted to tell his story. We as publishers decided we wanted to publish the book because we thought he had a right to tell his story. And so that's what we did. And so it was a fairly lengthy process. Bill hasn't been a writer, he's been a bishop, but he hasn't been a writer. And so it was a fairly lengthy process in terms of working with him to get something to the stage where we could publish. We got the first draft on Christmas Eve last year. The first draft. And we've been working on it solidly since then. The night before we went to the printer, the Friday before we went to the printer, I was in Brisbane all day with him. Sunday night before we went to the printer, I was on the phone with him clarifying this, clarifying that, blah, blah, blah. So I had to take ultimate responsibility for some of the glitches that have occurred in the first print run, but we're fixing it. That's the great beauty of printing on demand. So how do we bring it together? I'll just tell you quickly. The first part of the book is the story which Pat has outlined in terms of the early period of what went on with the Third Rite of Reconciliation, and then the visitation, and then the various meetings over the other issues, principally the 2006 pastoral letter. And as Frank Brennan said in his launches, he says it was a bit like a moving target. It was pretty hard to know what the key issue was because it changed over time. So the second part of the book is a fairly extensive list of appendices dealing with all of the correspondence, the Extraordinary Synod, the various other bits and pieces. And so it details all of that correspondence. So the book is a very big book, and that is why we thought it was important that all of those documents should be there. At first, Bill wanted to quote from the documents from Rome, and we said, no, Bill, those documents need to be in the book with the signatures of the various people who wrote to you and the various people you wrote to. So, finally, I'd just like to thank a few people. The title was the fourth title we had. I'll tell you one of the other ones, which I'm very glad we didn't use, which was, I didn't drink the water. No subtitle could have made that any clearer, I thought. So I said to Bill, I think, we should ponder on this for a little while. Then he came up with this one and he really liked it, and so I said, okay. It's rhyming, it's very catchy. The cover, some people don't like the cover. The cover was done by an artist in New Zealand, in Auckland, and she offered it to us because she was quite upset about the way Bill had been treated. Bill was very taken by the cover, by the artist's work, and she has donated, or given him a copy of that, the original. And so that was the one that we chose in the end for Bill. So I'd like to thank the various people who've assisted along the way in getting this book together. Bill's secretary, former secretary in Toowoomba, various people in my office, the various others who have helped with proofreading. And as I say, I take ultimate responsibility for the fact that the night before we went to print, we were still making corrections, so there's a few little glitches there. This book is in distribution here in Australia and is doing very well. Doing very well in Toowoomba because of the cancellation of the launch. I think nearly 400 copies have been sold through various means. It's also in distribution internationally. It's going to be very soon in EPUB. So a big thank you to all of those people who've been involved. There's a symbiotic relationship between an author or an editor and a publisher. A publisher can't have a book without an author or an editor, and an author can't have a book unless it's vanity press without working with a publisher who tries to put it together in a reasonable fashion. So we have a little gesture, it's ATF press to those who've been involved in a function. So I'd like to give Pat a couple of our books. We did a very big translation of Yves Congar's Diary of the Second Vatican Council a few years ago. Congar, French Dominican, embargoed it until the year 2000 because too many people had to die, including himself, before it was published. So we translated that a few years ago. And because Congar was one of the great ecumenists of the Vatican Council, and a lot of his work was in ecumenism, and he does refer to the Anglican Church, I thought Stephen would like a copy of it.